Yasna? I'm just a little concerned about the sound, Yasna. I think maybe everyone should mute who's not presenting, and then maybe we can.
I think they are muted. So hello everyone, and welcome to this Zoom event organized by the MEDCA Association. And thanks to all the participants, we appreciate you very much. For those of you who don't know us yet, MEDCA is an association of Slovenian nurses and other health workers in the field of medical cannabis treatment. And our main purpose is to encourage the improvement of knowledge of nurses and other employees in the health sector about treatment with cannabis and its active ingredients, as well as advocacy and counseling for individuals who are being treated with medical cannabis products. In order to achieve this goal and carry out the purpose, we invited two great experts from the United States who will share their experience and knowledge with us. First is Maureen Smyth, a nurse with a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, a passionate cannabis educator who leads medical cannabis training classes for dispensaries, healthcare specialists, and organizations. Her clinical nursing career consists of caring for spinal cord injured war veterans and working as a travel nurse. She is certified by the Medical Cannabis Institute Global in the medical cannabis curriculum for nurses and the core knowledge of the endocannabinoid system. She is healer certified as a cannabis advisor, and also she is a member of the American Cannabis Nurses Association. Next is Dr. Jean Talleyrand, medical doctor, a pioneer in cannabis specialist clinician. His experience spans nearly 25 years providing clinical guidance and consultation to patients using cannabis. Dr. Talleyrand is part of well-balanced clinical research team. His contributions to cannabis science involve community product categorization and user stratification. Dr. Talleyrand trained in the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center, receiving board certification in family and community medicine. He currently consults patients on complementary and alternative treatment with a focus on cannabis as herbalism. So thank you, Maureen, and thank you, Dr. Talleyrand, for this. We are very honored and appreciate the time and effort you put into this. I think we can learn a lot from you and your experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Yasna, can you see my screen?
No.
Oh. Share screen, start. How about now?
Okay, something is happening. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay, you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much, Yasna, for that introduction and a chance to speak with you. I do have to clarify that I am not an expert. As you will see, I am just stumbling, bumbling my way through this sort of new paradigm of medicine.
What happened? So what if Dr. Talleyrand starts?
I can do that.
Yeah, and then Mo continues.
Oh, she's back.
Oh, she's back. Okay.
Okay, hopefully, I did notice my internet was having a few problems, so I might have to relocate, but we're having a little bit of weather here in San Francisco.
Mo, what do
So
you
three
say?
things were true about my adolescence. I had great hair. I'm sorry?
We talked if Dr. Talleyrand starts, maybe.
Okay,
And
go
me?
ahead. Sure.
Okay.
Whoops. Okay, that's okay with you, Mo?
Yeah, that's fine. And my screen. Yeah, sorry.
And maybe I'll take my video off. That might help with the bandwidth too.
Okay.
Let me share my screen. Here it is. Okay, share. Okay.
Okay, great. We see.
You see it okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I was hoping Mo would give us an introduction. So Mo, if you want to chime in as I'm talking, please feel free to interrupt me. We are a small group here, so I think the conversation would go nicely if people also want to ask questions. What I was going to talk about is a project that we started in California and are expanding throughout the country, called the Dosing Project. And before I start with the Dosing Project, let me give you a little bit of a background on how I got here. As Yasna said, I am a family physician in San Francisco, California. I studied family and community medicine, and the community is really important as we focus in our practice on the community patterns, community habits, and family patterns, and feeling that that is important or integral to the care of an individual. So as I began my training in San Francisco in 1996, the Compassionate Use Act in California was passed, and that is a law that allows people in California access to cannabis legally to use for medical conditions. And what it required is for patients to come to a physician and ask for a recommendation to use cannabis. Of course, the patients had already used cannabis prior, as California is cannabis prevalent community. Since the Summer of Love in the 60s, the 1960s and 1970s, cannabis has been very popular in California. And eventually a law was passed allowing it, as it seemed contradictory to have many people using, but a law against it. So when I began my residency in 1995, just a year later, I began to see patients. Actually, my first patient came to me in 1998, and he was a man with chronic pain. And he came to me and handed over his opiate prescriptions to me and said, I no longer need these. And for those of you who know chronic pain patients, usually it's the opposite. They come to you and ask for more. Very rarely do you see a chronic pain patient requesting less opiate. So I was surprised and asked why, and he said, I would prefer to use cannabis. And I, being in San Francisco, I knew about cannabis, and I knew that it was relatively, there were not many adverse events reported with cannabis use. It was relatively safe, much safer than opiates, as opiates, have an increasing dose and potential overdose, death. There weren't many deaths from cannabis use. So I approved his recommendation, and I began investigating why the community was wanting the recommendation. And that's how that eventually turned into the dosing project, which is an effort to develop a dose effect hypothesis from community sourced data. And let me explain a little bit more on the next slide. So cannabis, unlike most single agent pharmaceuticals, has multiple potentially active ingredients. From dominant cannabinoids to minor cannabinoids to terpenoids, flavonoids, thiols, esters, these are the classes of chemicals that are potentially in cannabis, and I am just scratching at the surface. So unlike other medication, it's a complex problem, and what we call the many-to-many problem in our research group. So there really isn't much paradigm in drug discovery for multi-agent pharmaceuticals. Most pharmaceuticals are single agents. So how do we approach this? Additionally, the consumer profile had multiple categories influence the cannabis use, or that were influenced by the cannabis use. The patient's height and weight, whether they had any accompanying illnesses, even their social situation and marital status was important, and also population factors. And now you know why I emphasize the family and community medicine. As a family and community doctor, these factors are all important in the health of a patient. And so I have many potential active ingredients in one product, and many potential, I guess, effects, or not really effects, but categories to the consumer, and then also many effects. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So what is the problem, and why are we studying the dosing? Why did we start the dosing project? The dosing project is started because there was a community of consumers dosing cannabis with trial and error. And as you know, in standard pharmaceutical, we usually study the active ingredient and come up with measures of safety and efficacy, and we have a predictive outcome. But here, patients weren't sure what the outcome was going to be, and they were trying this and that to see how it would work. Also, and this is more recently, there's a study out of California that showed that since increase in cannabis use, there are more emergency department visits by the elderly. So elderly tend to have multiple medications prescribed to them, or they might not be familiar with cannabis products. And so that was an issue in that cohort, in that subgroup. A new diagnosis came around, cannabis-associated hyperemesis, with more access, more different products. Patients were experimenting, using different doses, and starting to get hyperemesis with cannabis use. The government does have oversight on the products, but it's not enough. They regulate. They ask for testing of the content in the plant, but only for dominant cannabinoids THC and CBD. As well, they ask for toxins, contaminants, micro contaminants, but they don't really ask to prove efficacy, to prove that the plant is having a particular effect. So the government was behind on traditionally how we treat pharmaceuticals. And then finally, the industry was marketing brands without quality assurance. And if you are in California, and Mo can tell you this, if there's a lot of variability in the products out there. You have to try different products, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So lots of things to figure out in the industry here in California. So rather than use a traditional approach to research, we considered two approaches. Well, the one on the right that uses deductive reasoning is a traditional approach, and the one on the left is seldom used. So inductive reasoning aims at developing a hypothesis or theory about the product, and deductive reasoning aims at testing that hypothesis. Well, because we had this product introduced to a community without much understanding, inductive rationale to study made more sense. Let's figure out quickly, let's develop some hypothesis about how this works, and then let's test to see if the hypothesis actually is true. So the dosing project is essentially casting a wide net over the multiple products out there and the multiple effects, and trying to make some sense out of it, rather than coming up with one product and testing that and then trying another, which is more like hunting for a needle in a haystack. The dosing project searched all problems in all products and tried to develop some theories around them. And at this time, when we started the dosing project, which was in 2015, we had already pharmaceuticals that contained THC as the only ingredient in the market, but many patients in the community were choosing not to use that product. They preferred the plant. And so often you may see that even if you prescribe a THC or CBD product, they will turn to your patient will turn to the plant instead. So we really wanted to look at the plant and look to see what was happening in the plant. And this is an old study that was done by botanists a year ago, but we repeated it. And just so you know, this is the plant on the left. I'm sure you have seen it, and this is the flower of the plant. It's it contains most of the active ingredients, although there are active ingredients in the leaves and stem and roots. The higher concentration is in the flower, and this is what the community tends to use. In that flower, there are multiple cannabinoids, and these are examples of cannabinoids. And you might already know that there are endocannabinoids as well. So our body has similar compounds, ligands that attach to certain receptors in the body. And I want to point out that these cannabinoids don't only have affinity for the cannabinoid receptors in our body. And I may be, if you have questions, please, I may be skipping because I just assumed Mo would have explained this. But the plant, when you test for the cannabinoids, has two dominant cannabinoids, THC and CBD. So because these tend to be in highest concentration, they are the best way to begin to characterize the flower chemically, develop a chemotype for the flower. So we use THC and CBD, and we sampled some 680 plants and plotted it, log of CBD, percentage CBD to log of percentage THC. And when you plot it this way, you can see that the flowers cluster into three types: type 1, type 2, type 3. Type 1 is a high THC, low CBD flower, usually at a ratio of 20:1. Type 2, which I believe you use more often in Slovenia, has an equivalent 1:1 ratio. And type 3, at least in California, is more rare, and it has a high CBD, low THC content, also in approximately a 20:1 ratio.
In Slovenia, it's mostly type 3.
One more time.
In Slovenia, it's mostly type 3.
Mostly
the high
type 3.
CBD and low THC ratio.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, in California, as you can tell, it's mostly type 1. And that's due to the years of illicit use that you will see type 1. I believe the hemp industry uses type 3 for fiber purposes and oil purposes. So that may be why you have more type 3 over there, or equivalent over there. So this is one way to characterize the plant, but remember there are many different categories of plants, and we moved on to the second group, which are terpenes. How did we get there? Again, we went to the community and asked, which type are you using and for what? There is a contest up in Northern California. Northern California has probably the longest history of cannabis growing in the United States. So we're close by, and we asked the people who are holding the awards, how do you determine the category? And the awards were called the Golden Tarp Awards, and they said, well, we enter them based on their aroma. If there's a earthy smelling flower, it's entered into earth category, and if there's a floral, it's entered in that category. Or fuel is more like a pungent aroma, then they entered in that category. There was a fourth category, which was fruity. We didn't include it in there because when we saw the data, it very much coincided with fuel. So we felt that was maybe a miscategorization by the community. And as you can see on the left, the different aromas were supposedly had different effects. The earth category tended to be best according to the community for pain, and the floral category tended to produce an energetic effect, an uplifting effect. And then the fuel category tended to promote sleep, or also for those who had opiate addictions, they tended to also prefer the fuel category. So using the community's experience, we looked at the chemistry of these subcategories and identified a pattern. And alpha-pinene, myrcene, and caryophyllene are one of a few of multiple terpenes in the plant, but these seem to be dominant in all plants, and they also had existed in a certain ratio. And as you can see, the earth had low pinene, low myrcene, but high caryophyllene. The floral had high pinene, high myrcene, but low caryophyllene, and the fuel had low, high, and high. Now you can go into the literature and look up these terpenes, and it will describe what typically the effect is. But when you're dealing with multi-agent pharmacology, it may not be significant to or important to look at the individual effect, because a combination of, let's say, alpha-pinene and THC and myrcene may have opposing effects, and there may be an interaction between those. And so really it was important to just observe the community and see what was happening with these different, as we call, aroma types. And then what we found further looking at other terpenes is that after looking at this, we began to pay attention to the ratio of terpenes, as we did to the cannabinoids, 20-1, 1-1, and then 20-1 again. We looked at the ratio of terpenes and saw a very interesting relationship between beta-pinene and limonene. And the fuel and the floral category tended to have opposing effects, right? The floral was energetic, but the fuel was sedative. The community was using words like sativa to describe the floral aroma type, and indica to describe the fuel aroma type. And then when we looked at the pinene-limonene ratio, we saw a very nice relationship where the floral had a 1-to-1 relationship between pinene and limonene, whereas the fuel had more of a 1-to-10 relationship. And so we thought, okay, this is the beginning of an algorithm. Rather than relying on aroma, and not everybody is able to smell the same, we can now get more objective and use these ratios to begin to study the plant based on analysis. Of course, there's all these discussions of analysis. So these relationships begin to develop an algorithm. And a lot of what we do at our research is using multivariate analysis and developing AI algorithms to use for product comparison. This is a sample, an inventory of flowers at a store in San Francisco. We expanded our algorithm to include a third branch here. And if you look at the previous floral category, you see this in 2 dimensions, but what was happening was that there was another dimension here with the larger red area that went down. And so we noticed that terpinolene was also influencing that dimension, and so we created a terpinolene branch. And this is where we are right now in terms of categorizing flower. These are all type 1 flowers. They have been analyzed for content, and as you can see, they fall into 3 nice categories that we have colored rather than putting a name as to not disturb what the community is calling them. So if a person is looking for that energetic effect, it will likely either be coming from the red category or the blue category. And if a person's looking for a sedative effect, it will likely come from the green category. We're testing this hypothesis right now. We've only sampled a handful. We've only sampled the staff at the store, but it seems to be working. And that's what we call the flight study. We give them flowers that are at the end of each of these arms, and we have them report on the effects for us. There's also a group of people who tend to prefer low terpene. And so there is a center here where we might choose, so that the more content, the more terpene content, the further out on the arm the product is. And so the canonical center here all have low terpene content. And so we choose a fourth flower from this flight study because there's people who prefer no terpenes or low terpenes. Now, I talked earlier about multiple categories of compounds, not just cannabinoids, not just terpenes. There are minor cannabinoids. There are esters. In fact, likely that fuel pungent smell that's coming from the fuel category, which is this green arm here, is due to not terpenes, but to thiols. Thiols are sulfur-containing compounds that produce that garlic-like, fuel-like pungent smell. But what we're finding is that the ratio of terpenes are able to, without even testing for the thiols, are able to define them in this green arm. So these terpenes are essentially surrogate markers for other compounds. But we will continue to investigate the other categories. So what do we do with this study? It's very simple. We have an online application, and as a proof of concept, we ask patients what they are using it for, and the inclusion criteria were those who described pain or disordered sleep, and otherwise they didn't respond. We asked them not to respond. They also were able to identify their cultivar based on high THC 1:1 or high CBD, and they marked that on in the application. We asked them to smell the flower and decide what the aroma was. We asked them how many puffs, and the key to inductive rationale or inductive reasoning is that getting very specific with the questions does not cast a wide net. And so your questions need to be general. You want to catch as much of things. And the consumers identified easily their dosage by how many puffs they took, how many inhalations they took. We also asked them based on weight, because after a certain amount of puffs, it seemed that they were more able to identify the amount that they use in 1/2 gram or which is about half of a cigarette or joint, and that's what they call it here, and or 1 gram or more, which is a full cigarette or joint. And then finally, we asked them to rate their experience. Sort of going back a little, the reason why we made the general categories, the cannabis use indications for health and wellness, and certainly there are people using it for more, well, what they might call recreational, although I feel recreation is a wellness attribute. So we've developed more questions, but this is a analysis of patients that were seen in a group of our cannabis specialty clinics. We asked them to identify as many of the reasons for using cannabis, and so they could select just pain, or they could select pain, mood, sleep, appetite, or if neither, then there was the other category. And we found that 96% of the respondents really were able to identify one of these four categories: pain, mood, sleep, or appetite. And so we felt that that was a pretty decent net. And so we added that to, we're adding that to our survey to expand. So initially we started with just pain and sleep, and we're adding mood and appetite to catch more respondents. Also, in the second version of the dosing project, you see how we've added dosage. Adverse events was important to identify, and I'll show you some data. We had that in the first version. And then I want to point out that the therapeutic response, we very much keep the data categorical rather than specific. So rather than do a rating of 1 to 100, which produced too many categories and made it difficult to get statistical significance, we really broke the group up of responses into 4 categories. It completely helped us. It almost completely helped us. It somewhat helped our symptoms, and not much. As well, the adverse events, you could choose as many as you wanted, but it was either yes or no, I had this event, or not. And I'll show you some results for that. So here's
I'm sorry, the users were inhaling just, no orally.
Correct.
Okay.
We found, and I did look quickly at your study, what people are doing in Slovenia. Most people who use cannabis in California inhale, over 50%. So very different, and that's probably because of the culture. It's been here for decades, and that's how they were introduced to it. So most are inhaling. And so we figured we would look under the light. You know, that's what most people are doing. They're using flowers, they're inhaling. We do want to look at other routes of administration, like ingestion and topical, and we are beginning to do that. But this was a proof of concept. We figured we'd get more data if we chose the popular route of administration. And how did we decide on the dose? Well, if you remember the first graph with the type 1, 2, 3, if you throw a dart in the center of each circle, you can estimate an average number of milligrams for each of the types. And so we estimated the milligrams from that study, and then asked the respondents to tell us their weight, and we're able to define a milligram per kilogram. Again, this is inductive, this is not deductive, and so we're looking for an approximate amount of flour being used. The best category, each of these categories are the responses 0, 1, 2, 3, the 4 therapeutic responses. The best response was in the completely improved. Others were not so specific. We also tried to look at the difference between smoking and vaporizing the flour. For those of you who don't know, there are devices being sold to lower the temperature of combustion. Okay. And so for the complete response for pain, it was approximately 0.94 milligrams per kilogram, or 1 milligram per kilogram, which for your average adult is approximately 3/4 of a gram, so almost a complete cigarette. And those who were using 3/4 of a gram were reporting a complete response. Those who were using less were not, and so we're beginning to see somewhat of a dose effect relationship for pain. We also looked at sleep, and although the dose was a little higher, it's approximately the same, again, for your average adult, and also is very tight. So those who were using the 1 milligram, approximately 3/4 of a gram, were getting a complete response for sleep.
Dr. T, is there any way to have that dose equate to other modalities like the edibles and the gummies and all the candy we have here?
Great,
or capsules?
That's a great question. It's something that my research partner and I always talk back and forth about. I tell my patients that there are different routes of administration. So you're inhaling, first of all, it's going through the lungs. You're not having it's not going through the liver first. So you're not getting that first pass effect. And most of the smoke is going out into the air. So you're maybe getting about 1/3 of it in your lungs. Anyway, so that's, there are a lot of factors to translate one to the other. So what I usually do is approximate, and then also there's the onset of action, right? Inhaling gives you an relatively immediate onset of action, within the first 10 or so minutes, while ingesting takes a good 45 minutes maybe to have the onset of action, and then also lasts longer. So really hard to compare the two routes of administration. So we're going to look at the data separately, but you're asking a very practical question, Mo, because as I try to guide my patients and suggest that they ingest, it's difficult to decide. So I usually say to them, if you're smoking, if your dose is 1 gram, then a 20 milligram THC edible might be equivalent, and 0.5 gram, 10 milligrams. So that's sort of my rule of thumb, but it's a bit of a guess.
Thanks. Perfect answer.
And here are the adverse events. So because people were answering this online, we weren't looking for serious adverse events, which are usually, things where you have to go to the hospital, or severe adverse events. These people were responding after they were using, and so they couldn't respond if they were in the hospital. So that's unlikely that we have that data. So we had these adverse events that we were able to look at the literature, and we've added more in the second version. But as you can see, most of the adverse events are cough and dry mouth. What I thought was interesting in this graph also is that as the dose increased, the number of adverse events seemed to decrease, and you might think the opposite. So that may have something to do with tolerance of the user, or who knows, but it's an important characteristic to note. And when looking at the other types, it seemed to also be the same. As the dose increased, there were less adverse events. The number is important to look at, the number of responses. So if you look at the bottom right here, these are the number of responses. And of course, the second dose category, which is 3 to 4 puffs, was the most used. And that probably is why there are more adverse events in that. And that's going to come up later in our analysis also. It's a hint of why that's the more popular dosage category. And here you see for both type 2 and 3, inhaled, same thing. Okay, so this is one of my favorite slides. I think it's interesting because, well, first of all, we looked at type 1. This is a contingency analysis. And just to orient you, the red, yellow, and green are the responses, are the therapeutic responses. Green being complete, yellow almost, red somewhat. And there's a little thin line on the bottom of people who reported no therapeutic response. But these are people likely who are using cannabis regularly for the effect. So there's a selection bias there. But notice also in this graph, the width of the column lets you know how many patients reported for that category. And you see again that the 3 to 4 puffs is the widest column. So most people were using there, but it's also the column that didn't get as good of a therapeutic response as the 1 gram category. So again, we're seeing a dose effect relationship where the lower dosage is getting less of a complete response and the higher dose is getting more. But it is a, well, I mean, we'll go into why, but now that was type 1 flowers for both pain and sleep. And when we begin to dive get a little bit more precise, looks what happens on the right. There is not such a good dose response curve. So why is that? You know, why are why is it that for pain, and this may be highlighting what the community has been telling us, that only a certain flower type works for pain, and that may be why we see this erratic, because this is from all different aroma types. Here's another dose effect relationship, and this time we use milligram per kilogram of THC, calculated, as I told you before. And here you do see for pain and for sleep, a nice dose effect response. And for those of you who need to understand how to read this, this is logistic fit. So I look at the space, the blue is the border, and the space between the lines are what we're reading. And as you can see, for complete response, at a low dose, there's not much of a probability, but as you increase the dose, you get a greater probability. There's more white space between the lines, at least for complete response, for pain, as well as for sleep. So there is a way to calculate a dose effect. It seems to be important to incorporate THC content and the weight of the patient or consumer. Here's more logistic fit, but we broke it up for pain and sleep, and also broke it up by aroma category. And the yellow boxes are statistically significant effects. And we are seeing a dose effect relationship for floral and earth, which we didn't expect. We expected it more for earth, as that's what the community had told us, but we saw it for floral, less so for sleep, and that may be because there's not enough power, there's not enough responses in the sleep category, but we did see that the earth produces more sleep. One thing about the earth category that I need to point out, when we looked at the chemistry, the terpenes in the earth category, they really were attenuated, meaning that earth is probably an old cultivar. I know it's a storage issue. What we're seeing is early in harvest season, we don't see many earth cultivars out there, but as it goes later past harvest season, there's more earth, and we see less terpene content in the earth category. So it may be just old cannabis. All right, this is another analysis where we looked at the number of respondents for each category, and also by therapeutic response. So the top is complete response, and the lower one is not at all. And you can see not very many people. The numbers are the number of respondents, total of 94. And then the blue bar is a calculation of number of respondents minus number of respondents with adverse events over the number of respondents. What that measures basically as the higher the blue bar, the safer, the less adverse events are happening among that group of patients. And you can see in the complete response, only 3 patients took 3 or 4 puffs, but none of them had any adverse events. And in the 1 gram category, 5 patients took a complete response, and maybe one of them adverse event. So these were sort of successful doses. And of course, we are working to get a lot more respondents in this. I think that's going to be important. But what mostly was interesting in this category is this sort of bottleneck down at the bottom with the 3 to 4 puff category that was only somewhat giving a response for pain, where most people were stopping at 3 to 4 puffs and not increasing their dose, but not getting a complete therapeutic effect as well. And as you will see, this is likely because of the adverse events that they were experiencing. It's not, they were noting that the adverse events were pretty good, but based on the previous graph, we saw more adverse events happening in the 3 to 4 puffs. And we looked for a different way to measure that. So we did the same graph, but this time we broke it up into the 3 aroma types, and kind of are seeing a trend here. And you can see down at the 3 to 4 puffs where the 21 responses, really it was the fuel category that was not giving any adverse events, while the floral and earth were giving more. But what we saw was that there was a sort of an ideal dosage with the least amount of adverse events and a complete response. And there was a trend where floral was best used at 3 to 4 puffs, while earth was best used at 0.5 gram, and fuel was best used at 1 gram. And so we sort of developed that as a hypothesis to be proved later. But there's this sort of trend, as you can see, from floral to earth to fuel. Here's another type of analysis called multiple correspondence analysis. And the way this works is you have multiple categories and you compare them to multiple categories. So it's a great way of evaluating the many-to-many problem in cannabis. And the way you read this graph is that the arrows show a direction of effect, and we selected this. The true graph is on the right, which is almost impossible to read, but we selected specifically safe and effective doses, so only complete responses without adverse events. And by looking at this graph, there's an association. So the closer that an arrow is to a blue dot, that is the best association. And so you can see there's a very good association. Oh, I didn't put the 3 to 4 puffs here. There's a very good association with the floral and the 3 to 4 puffs, which is this blue dot here. Whereas as well, there's a good association with the fuel flower type and the 1 gram. Not as great with the 0.5 gram and the earth, but those are the 3. And so again, it's sort of proving what we were seeing in the earlier graph, that there is some association for complete responses and no adverse events based on aroma type. This is helpful, will be helpful down the line when somebody is selecting a flower type and wanting a particular outcome. We can suggest which flower type would be best. And also develop a more deductive approach. And then we created a safety index. It's really similar to the therapeutic index in pharmacology. We used logistic fit and identified 50% probability of an adverse event and looked for the dosage there, and then put it over an effective dose where we identified 50% probability of, it's not either, it's both complete and almost complete responses, and drew a line there. So we took the responses and split them in half, basically, and developed an index. And this is how we calculated the index using the logistic fit of before, because we're only using 2 responses rather than 4, we're able to get one line and draw down and see the dosage that works. So the index shows that there's a narrow range of therapeutic index here. 1.5 is what we calculated for the floral, and a broader range of therapeutic index for the earth. So that helps us in terms of suggesting flowers as well. If somebody is wanting to avoid adverse events, you would suggest the attenuated earth aroma type. Okay, so what did we find out from just taking basically a market survey, right? A lot. Cannabis flowers can be categorized by type 1, 2, and 3 dominant cannabinoids. They can also, aroma can be predictive of their effect, right? And then you can, but with the aroma, you can get a more objective measure by checking terpene content, and there are just surrogate markers. You don't have to look at all the terpenes. At this point, usually when they look at a flower type, they will check 30 or more terpenes, but we only need 6 or 7 of them to develop our algorithm. And so that's going to be helpful also for the industry. Health and wellness indications can be grouped into pain, mood, sleep, and appetite, and that would cover 96% of all users, of medical users anyway. And then people who smoke cannabis for pain or sleep and get a complete improvement are likely to be dosing at about 1 gram for the average adult. And then 1 gram also seems to be reporting less adverse events. Dosage may be gated by adverse events, less people using the floral type. And maybe that's why they're not increasing their use if they're using a floral type. And then a safety index can be used to compare effective cannabis dosage. So a lot of math, a lot of graphs, but there are people behind these. This is not somebody who smokes. This is Evelyn. I've known her, Evie is what her mama calls her. I've known her since she was 4 years old, when pink is her favorite color, as you can see. And she came into my office wearing a pink helmet because she was diagnosed with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which is a rare seizure disorder that happens all day long, all week long. So the pink helmet was because she would fall, and it was protecting her. And also the physicians had her on phenobarbital, which made her very sleepy. And so that also was a problem. This is her mother sending me a picture of her this year. She's 13 now. When I knew her younger, we had to work through the dosage, and she was using a CBD tincture, by the way. She was not smoking. She was using a CBD tincture, and we had to figure the dosage out together. We did. We started a drop at a time and kept increasing, and came up to an approximately 10 milligram per kilogram dosage of CBD. We were getting the oil donated from a local grower. It didn't work all the time. It worked very well, better than her pharmaceutical medicine, but it didn't work all the time because the growers would have different batches with different terpene content. And so it changed. Now she's on Epidiolex. And for those of you who don't know, Epidiolex is a CBD oil-based tincture that is recommended to be dosed at 10 milligrams to 25 milligrams per kilogram. And she's more stable right now, more, as her mom points out, more alert. And she's on the dosage that we figured out through trial and error. So it's possible to help someone before science catches up to it. That's what I have.
This was great, really great presentation, great. Thank you, Dr. Can we maybe have like no more presents and then all the questions, or do you prefer know the questions, then more presents and questions for her?
I prefer to ask a doctor now because later on I probably should leave, but
Okay.
I would like to ask something.
Yeah.
Okay, then if anyone has a question for our lecturer, Dr. Talleyrand, now it's the time to ask, please.
Yes, Dr. Talleyrand, are you hearing me? Hello? Yeah.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
Yes, thank you. My name is Dr. Eli Reznik. I am also considered to be one of the most experienced cannabis physicians in Israel. So I would like to bring you my appreciation, and even I was amazed how delicate and professionally you deal with this very serious issue of dosing and the stratifying of patients, because till now we do not have any kind of guidelines or any kind of approach to have some guidelines to dosages and to clinically approved approach to so-called entourage effect. I probably have some questions to you about when you are saying we do not need to think about all components of cannabis, just about 5 or 7 terpenes out of whole entourage effect. So is it proved, or how because if it is correct, it will make some revolution in cannabinoid medicine, because now we should take into account whole factors, the whole abundant entourage effect. But when you are saying we should have some major terpenes and other maybe minor cannabinoids, so it could change the whole picture. So please tell something about it. Thank you.
Science conference in San Diego, promoting our new categorization scheme. We have last I checked, only 7 responses for the new algorithm. So it's premature, but I will tell you that it is working, the categorization scheme. And we thought it would work because remember, the community has gone through decades of trial and error with this, and we used their input to develop our algorithm. So we believe that is really where the value comes from the community, is that they've done the hard work of making mistakes with the flower and settling at certain types. So I think we should credit them.
In case it is proved, so also I would like to say that your hypothesis is going aligned with the hypothesis of my friend, Professor Eitan Russo, that published quite recently a paper, I'm sure that you know about it, that
yeah,
our nose knows, yes.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. He didn't have our categorization scheme, but he is correct. And Dr. Russo has talked with we've talked with Dr. Russo in the past. He's been focusing on genetic variations of the plant, but I am happy that he's also looking at the aroma types. I think that's valuable.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I really amazed of the scientific. First of all, this is a very good methodological study because you have some real world observation and you just stratified patients with the different categories. So you based on the clinical practice, not so-called evidence, because you just derive the evidence out of your practice. This is the most rational approach to such kind of studies. Thank you very much again.
Absolutely. And we believe that cannabis is maybe leading, because again, we are thinking that that with this approach, we will develop some multi-agent formulations, and then we will test them in the traditional way. But this could create a new class of medication from all botanicals, not just cannabis. It may be sort of a new way of looking at pharmacology rather than single agent pharmacology, which is the traditional approach. We should be looking at multi-agent pharmacology. With our computational abilities these days, the ability to look at to solve the many-to-many relationships through multivariate analysis, this could be revolutionary for the world. As you know, botanicals are cheaper and more accessible than pharmaceutical.
Yes, we are looking for your publication. Out of this project, you could derive 3 or maybe more very good papers. I am a reviewer of cannabinoid research, you know, and I really invite you to and encourage you to submit it to our journal or maybe another journal. We have 2 or 3 very good ranked journals. Please publish it because many other doctors should know about it. Thank you.
Agreed. And I will direct you to our website where we've put slides of our presentations and my email if you have questions. As you can tell, I am passionate about this. I work 7 days a week, so feel free.
Please put it on the chat. This is very useful. Thank you for announcing that. Maybe we can use some of your slides for our presentation, just on your permission, just of course.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I can give you Dr. Talleyrand's contact also.
Oh,
I can
perfect.
connect
Thank
you
you.
too.
I have a question, Dr. Talleyrand. So I've been studying terpenes myself, like fascinated with the world of terpenes and how long they've been around and how long they've been helpful to plants and the plant kingdom, how the plant kingdom uses them, and then to, you know, try to equate them to different flower that people are using here in California. I think that for me as a nurse, I mostly come across those people who experience those adverse effects at 3 puffs and then don't kind of get to the best therapeutic dose. Because they're like you said, gated by the adverse effects. So is there, well, and then, so my first question is, I can smell flower all day and still, it takes a lot to develop that nose.
Yes, you have to be a sommelier of absolutely. Let me show you something. Let me share.
Yeah, you can share.
Okay.
Just click share screen.
Okay.
And I'm also straddled by the adverse effects at 3 puffs too, and then I can't really do a lot of smoking. As you know, as a nurse, we just can't do that right now.
Yes, Mo, it's called mileage.
What's it called?
Mileage. You know, it depends how much you use it.
Yeah.
Dose is important. Dose is important.
Yeah.
So if you see here, this is how we've categorized our algorithm. So for those who cannot smell, we're just assigning a color. And you see that the colors are the red, green, and blue. What we're doing at the store is we're just putting a little sticker on each of these. If the color fades, then it's less terpene content. If it's more intense, it's more terpene content. We code, and we're trying to get the whole community to use. But remember, we've only tested about 7 or 9 patients at this point. So we wanted to get some more data before putting it out there, just in case there were problems with it.
And then in terms of the side effects, is it somewhat true in your experience? Have you noticed that the sort of tolerance you can build a tolerance to the adverse effects with the mileage? Thank you, Bozo. Over time, putting the miles in, but not develop adverse effects, but not build tolerance to the effects that you're trying to achieve, like pain and sleep.
Well, for the heavier dosers, they tended to use fuel, right? And so, I don't know if it's because of the pain, because of the need for sleep, or because they tend to be more tolerant. It seems to me that the blue and the red, which are closer to the floral type, one has terpinolene, the red has terpinolene dominant, and the blue is pinene dominant, alpha pinene dominant. We're noticing that they tend to have more adverse effects. Terpenes occur in clusters, right? They occur in clusters. So there, in the pinene cluster, there's an active called saponine, which is a terpene that may be causing headaches for people, because I think saponine is noted to have headaches. So that might be why there's an adverse event for more adverse events in this category. We, like I said, we're just starting with these. We've only got 9 people filling it out, so we're very excited to see what kind of adverse events are associated with each tag.
Thanks.
I just want to say that this is very good perspective about the terpenes and about the smell, because people, the community, you don't need to be a scientist to smell, like you said, fuel or florals or everything, and they can then say this is like fuel, this is like, and people naming the cannabis plant, some people naming their cannabis plant of this smell. I know a man, he named the cannabis plant lemon because it smelled of lemon. But it's not the name of the cannabis plant, but they are naming the cannabis plant because of the smell. So very interesting.
Yes, and in the US, they will change the name if one is selling more than another. All of a sudden, your plant changes. There's no objectivity, which is why we wanted to develop an objective. This is data from the same store and our first attempt at the flight study that we're describing. This is interesting. First of all, just so you know, myrcene is not part of our algorithm. And the reason why it's not is that in the data, it's variable. We really think myrcene is produced by the user. It's not a genetically determined, it's more how it's grown. If the plant is put under stress, it increases the myrcene and ocimene levels. So we did not include myrcene in our algorithm. We want to do studies where we have low myrcene and high myrcene to try to understand the effect of myrcene in there. This study has approximately the same amount of myrcene in each varietal, and you'll see that we chose 3 corners toward the end and then one kind of in the middle in the green. In California, the green type is really the most dominant type out here for probably various reasons. And so we tend to see a lot more of that, but we'll let you know that we'll tell you what the data shows from this flight. That's what we're collecting right now and checking it out. This is also a very interesting, you see this pink dot that sort of is straying away from the rest of the other dot. This is a cultivar called Pink Boost Goddess, which has a 1-to-1 THCV to THC ratio and has high terpinolene content. Seems to be very popular in the community for uplifting creative effects. And so we're wondering if it's starting its own branch, its own arm, or if it's simply just part of the others. So we want to include that one in our study too.
Hello. Hello, I have a question.
Sure.
My name is Vido Mahan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Dr. Talleyrand. Yeah, I have a practical question. I'm not an expert using cannabis for treatment or for relieving of pain. I don't even use them for hobby purposes. But I'm looking at another alternative. It's actually used for me. Have you ever tried using cannabis to treat ADHD disorder and anxiety? Because as you mentioned, some brands, some types of cannabis do have a stimulating effect. And I got great results with pharmacological drugs that were based like stimulants, like Adderall and similar things.
A great question. Absolutely is the answer. In fact, the cultivar that I'm pointing out, the grower is saying that it's very good for ADHD. What we've been doing also is using quantitative EEG as a way to quantify objectively as a biomarker for mood effects. And we're finding that there are different respondent types to cannabis in a 2-to-1 ratio. And the ADHD may be the part of the one of the ratio, the less common. So yeah, we feel that they tend to get almost the opposite effect of the other group. That so it's important to look at the respondent type too. What I presented didn't separate it that way, and down the road, that's really what we're wanting to do.
Well, actually, my experience was in Slovenia. If you're not diagnosed with an ADHD condition as you are a child, you're not able to get stimulant drugs to treat your ADHD. And this is, I'm speaking on my own case because I had this experience and I've been looking at it for like 3 years. And I got great results with stimulants to treat my ADHD and anxiety, but I'm not being able to acquire the medicine from via the official doctors. And I'm looking at the alternatives. And as you mentioned, some brands, I don't know, the Flora or which one, the type of cannabinoids does have a stimulating an effect. And as you mentioned, yes, it's different for each person, but as a substitute for ADHD medicine, there are basically stimulants and the derivatives from basically amphetamines. It could be a more natural solution to this, just to fight the anxiety and to make the mood better. And my question is, what exact type would you suggest to try treating this?
I would suggest the pink type, which is the red type, which is it's an algorithm, so it's difficult. It's the floral aroma, if that helps you determine. If you have terpene analysis, look for a type that has high terpinolene content in it, and try that. That is what patients are telling me seem to be working for.
But do you think after using this at the dosage that would actually have to be precisely acquired for me? Well, I would try. The only way I can think of it would be with trial error, just to try
Yeah,
it
it
find
would
the
have
right
to be.
dosage.
Yeah, it would have to be trial and error for dosage as well. There's another issue. Although at the conference yesterday, I talked to an ADHD person who said that ingesting also worked. We're not sure that ingesting terpenes actually has an effect. We thought that terpenes may be more active through aroma. You know, as you know, aromatherapy is mostly terpene therapy. And there are G-coupled protein receptors. The olfactory sensors are G-coupled protein. So it may be affecting that way. So we still have to prove whether it works ingesting versus inhaling.
Yeah, well, I would prefer ingesting because I'm not a fond smoker of cannabinoids. I do smoke them like twice a year, but I would prefer to take them say orally. But yeah, okay. So this would be the starting point. But the main thing is, do you think this would? I'm afraid of the side effects, of the adverse effects. I'm looking for a solution that will make me be able to be business able, business enabled. You know, not just to function, but to function in a business, in a situation, in you know, not to be seen. Not to be seen as someone that's under the effect of someone. Do you think it's possible to achieve?
Yes, I mean, a lot of cannabis users are highly functioning once they've determined their dosage. And Mo will tell you that the approach for the dosage is to start at a small dose and try that for a while, and then increase slowly until you titrate to an effective dose. That helps minimize the negative effects of it, but it is experimental, absolutely.
Yeah, basically trial and error. Yeah, I think.
Dr. Talleyrand.
Yes.
It is a similar approach that we want to do it, but we have our patients are using mostly other methods of applications, you know. So I wonder what will be the results, but the smokers, you know, of cannabis, they usually ferment the cannabis before smoking. So I think this is the reason why they use mostly fuel, so-called fuel cannabis. Because we are now following terpenes for a few years, and if you have a fresh cannabis, as you said, it's different cannabinoid profile as if you have fermented cannabis. So maybe this is the reason.
Yes, I first heard about fermented cannabis in an ingested product, somewhat like kombucha. From a patient up in Humboldt County, that's Northern California. He uses it himself, and his wife had cancer, and he very much believes that's what cured her. You know, it's anecdote, but he's a big proponent of that. And if he heard you mentioning fermented ingested beverages, he would be very excited. I will tell him that you are trying it in Slovenia too.
Did you say fermented cannabis beverages?
Yeah, that he's making kombucha and putting cannabis in there.
Huh.
No,
Yeah.
I suggest we continue, and you present, and maybe then some questions.
Yes, we very
you
much,
think-
there's an old method of using cannabis that you may be more familiar with than we are in California, that I've been trying to promote. It's taking the flour, boiling it in water for 20 minutes, like a decoction, then straining the flour out and drinking the water. We did run that decoction through the lab, only for cannabinoids, and we found that there were more acidic cannabinoids for the CBD flour. It was a 80% to 20%, where 80% was CBDA, and about 20 to 30 milligrams per cup of water. And then for the THC type 1 flour, there were a little bit more, so THC decarboxylated, and so there was a little bit more THC in that one. If you want the exact numbers, on our publications page of our website, the presentation is called "The Time Has Come: Water Decoction Method," where you can get the data for that, or at least the results.
What about the side effects for the water decoction?
Well, if you're using type 3 flours, for example, my Dr. Abrams, my research partner, he recently had inguinal surgery and used it post-op, CBD flours, for that, and he seemed to prefer that than taking the opiates. His son did a type 1, and it was too intoxicating for him. So, but he wasn't used to. I think in a type 1, when you drink a full cup, you get about 12 milligrams of THC, and he wasn't used to that dosage. So, I think he took too much of it, or maybe should have done it with the type 3. But it's an interesting way to go. It's cheap, and it stores in cold temperature refrigerator. It stays stable for 3 days, so you can make a batch. We very much would like to use the type 3 and make a water and test athletes, especially those who are getting traumatic brain injuries.
Yeah.
And see if that's helpful, because CBDA has some anti-inflammatory potential.
Amazing.
But
We've
what
got a lot of
about
work to do.
cannabinoids in this water?
One more time.
What about the cannabinoids like CBD and THC in the water? They are not water soluble, or
They're not water soluble. That's why the water solubilizes the acidic form much better than the neutral form. And that's why you tend to get a higher acidic content in the water, which we thought was better, likely more bioavailable in its acidic form. Some patients do like to take the flour and juice it, put it in a morning smoothie, and drink the flour that way, where they're getting mostly acidic cannabinoids. So yeah, because it's water, if you put a fat in there, you're going to get higher decarboxylated content, and you'll get
I wanted
more
to
psychoactive.
suggest milk.
Yeah, no, milk will get you more psychoactive. So and there are traditional preparations like Bang, which uses, I believe, a coconut oil or something to but that is a more psychoactive. We were looking for more anti-inflammatory, less psychoactive. And, you know, I believe the water decoction method is used in Jamaica for children or the elderly who are sick. We did see it. I saw an animal model study with CBD water decoction for ulcerative colitis that I thought was very interesting. But yeah, the idea is to avoid the psychoactive effect in order to get, you know, more tolerability.
Huh. Well, Jasna, what do you think? Should we postpone mine? I know, because mine is more about the nursing process, you know, the process of nursing, cannabis nursing. What do you think?
I say we continue. You
Okay.
start your presentation. It's
Okay.
it's gonna be recorded. If somebody wants to go to sleep here in Slovenia, it's almost 9:30. It's gonna be 9 almost. So we're gonna record and they can watch it later, the next day.
Okay, so you can see my screen?
Not yet.
Jasna?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Yes. Are you nodding yes?
No. Something's happening. Oh, okay. Okay.
You see me as a teenager?
Yes.
Okay. 3 things were true about my, yep, there you go. 3 things were true about my adolescence. I had great hair. I was a pretty good soccer player and I loved cannabis. In retrospect, I was probably medicating for anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Since my soccer career didn't take off like I wanted to, I actually became a very young mom. That's me at 18 with my son. And then the rest of my family. And I spent the majority of the time between 18 and 36 raising 2 beautiful, amazing children. Along the way, we lost our my husband and their father. Between 2006 and 2011, I was 38 years old and I started my career, and I was happy. I was making money and my children were doing well. We were all in college at the same time. This is a picture of my camper. I'm not sure why it's not showing up, but in 2011, I bought a rickety old camper and I drove across the country to California just for a good 4 or 5 years when I landed in the Emerald Triangle. Let me do one thing and try to fix my internet. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure why it's not.
Oh no, we lost Mo again. Oh, here she is. Mo, are you
Okay,
here?
there's my Rick. Can you
Yes,
hear me?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm
So
going.
here's my,
Okay, bye, Ilya.
go ahead.
Bye.
Yes.
Here's
Thank you
the
for lecture.
camper I
I
bought.
will see it later.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I ended up in the Emerald Triangle, and as you can see, it's quite green. The Emerald Triangle is the area that Dr. Talleyrand
No,
referenced
share the
in Northern.
screen. You are not sharing the screen. Okay.
Hello. I think Miss Mo is too far away from the router, from the Wi-Fi signal. Maybe she could move a little bit closer to it, and then we would hear her.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually did that.
We see the camper now.
Are we any better?
Yes.
So I ended up in the Emerald Triangle, which is the area that Dr. Talleyrand referenced in Northern California, which is where the longest history of cannabis cultivation has occurred in the United States of America, where at one point 80% of America's cannabis came from this area. I was still not involved in cannabis until April 2018. It was precipitated by the loss of my son, who very much told me that cannabis was going to be a global commodity that was going to change the world in 2003. After I lost him, after he died, I wandered around the country. I just wandered. I didn't even know where I was. These are very divergent areas of the country: Chicago, New Mexico. Then I started wandering to cannabis conferences, and all I could do during that time period was just go to cannabis conferences. This is the Hemp Industry Association when hemp became legal in the United States in 2018. I didn't have a lot of money, so what I did was volunteer. This was a volunteer event where I met a bunch of women in cannabis doing amazing things, mostly commodity-wise. And this is what I was interested. Of course, I'm a nurse and I've seen the suffering and I've seen people not get better, but I was very much interested in the commodity aspect and the commercialization of this product in a way that, that just sparked my interest. I went to one of our biggest conferences in Las Vegas, which has about 30,000 people at this event. And this is where I started promoting the idea that we needed nurses who had both knowledge of the body and how cannabis works in the body in dispensaries. And I would just kind of now at the conferences, I would promote this idea that it would be important to have medical personnel in the dispensaries where all our products are sold. Because in America, I know Dr. Talleyrand referenced it a little bit, we almost have too much product. There's so much product out on the market. We have our gummies and we have our tinctures and we have our flour, and we have our topicals and we have our capsules. And again, Dr. Talleyrand said, there's no real quality assurance to these products. People are trying and stopping, and people are having adverse effects, which is unfortunate because this is a medicine that can help so many people, yet so many people stop taking it because of the adverse effects. In November 2019, I landed in New York City, and I started reading about, I was very close to Chinatown, and I was seeing people walk around with masks, and I started reading about this virus that was also global. And what I ended up doing, I went to my last conference and then I went home. I just traveled back to California to go home. And because the world had shut down, I just started studying on my own. And I learned from the American Cannabis Nurses Association what nurses should do. There was no template for what nurses should do. And so the American Cannabis Nurses Association recommended a course, the Medical Institute Global, that was kind of okay, but it really wasn't in depth and it had more anecdotal information. It wasn't until I saw the course that Dr. Sulak created. Dustin Sulak is a well-known cannabis educator, also global, who wrote this endocannabinoid system for physicians. And at that point, my education really took off. I started an LLC because that's what my small business advisor told me to do. I started writing for publications. This was after my first conference. I started thinking about we need to raise the standard for the dispensary education. This is still a work in progress in America. We're not quite there yet. We're getting there. This article I wrote with Dr. Sulak, CBD for Children, because this was the CBD boom era. And what people were doing is they wanted to use it for everything and everyone. And then, of course, we know that, you know, CBD and THC are pretty good for PTSD. I did local talks wherever I could. This is the Veterans Association in my small town. This was a PTSD event because we had wildfires up north and people were really, really struggling with the loss of, you know, their health and their income and their houses and their feeling of safety because the wildfires are getting worse and worse up there. And then I did some online conferences with some friends. I started presenting at other conferences. This is my Don't Stress the ECS presentation I did, because one thing we should know about the endocannabinoid system, it very much, it can be downregulated due to stress, or even like hyperregulated due to stress. So I started an online public school called Cannabis Public School. Next month will be 1 year since I started offering free public education on Zoom. We have a textbook, and every week I prep a lecture. Our first text was called the
Okay, we lost Mo again. I hope she comes. Oh, okay.
Am I back?
Yes, yes.
I apologize.
Just share the screen. Okay.
So I meet every Sunday where I teach cannabis public school, because, like I said, this path that I'm on for cannabis nurses is very much a you're making your own path, just like patients are finding their own dosing and finding their own products, and I am finding my own way here as a cannabis nurse. But like I said, Cannabis Public School is 1 year old next month. And this semester, we are following Bonnie Goldstein's book, Cannabis is Medicine, which has an amazing amount of dosing protocols in it that have been helpful for her patients. I asked other nurses and physicians to share their knowledge as guest speakers. I am getting some 5-star reviews for what I teach. Along the way, I became a continuing education provider. So my next step is to plan on teach as many nurses as possible about the endocannabinoid system. This is my, I call it the evolutionary and revolutionary endocannabinoid system, because we can fix our health through Can y'all hear me?
Yes, yes. Just share the screen and where you left. Sorry.
So the endocannabinoid system is very much something nurses can teach. We can teach
share the screen. Share the screen. Share. Okay. There you go.
So the endocannabinoid system is very much something nurses can teach nurses. and nurses can teach their patient, because this system, as you all know, I didn't get very clinical in this lecture, is that this system can very much be toned to regulate our bodies in ways that we may not even need medications if we follow food plans that work for our body without a lot of processed foods. If we moderate our alcohol consumption, if we stay away from tobacco, if we are in community, if we play music, if we do anything that coordinates that flow process where you're painting or you're surfing or you're roller skating, and you get into a flow, you are very much toning your endocannabinoid system. And then to add cannabis on top of that, you're really Yasna, I think I'm just having too many problems.
Maybe your internet connection is slow.
I know, I think it's the weather over here. I'll just go through I actually am pretty much, I am pretty much done. So in California,
I'm sorry.
what's that?
I'm sorry. I might give you a suggestion. You're obviously having trouble with bandwidth. If you're close enough to the router, that shouldn't be a problem. But when you share a picture, then your connection gets overwhelmed. So maybe just try talking without the pictures. My suggestion. I'm an IT specialist.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you. And I am almost done. So let me stop my share.
You are not sharing.
Okay. Okay. All right. So in California, determined in May of 2022, this is just a model that you guys may use. It's actually two really good models. In California, determined in May of 2022, it is within the scope of practice of registered nurses to administer a medication or therapeutic agent, such as medical cannabis, ordered by and within the scope and licensure of a physician in a school. So these are our epileptic children who have to take THC. This was one patient who had the law changed where when he was about to go into a seizure, he can get a nasal spray. And then during the day, he had a CBD THC tincture that kind of stabilized him. And the law passed in May 2022 that nurses can administer this. So this is maybe one route where we can, because you have to sneak into the industry. You really have to kind of gently glide into the industry. And to, you know, these epileptic children are suffering, and there is a lot of research showing that that the cannabinoids are helpful. Another approach that California does is hospice. So again, we have a law passed in California where hospice patients are allowed to use cannabis in the hospital. And there's all sorts of regulations, and there's not a lot of buy-in yet. However, there's not a lot, because the hospitals say we're going to lose federal funding, so we can't, you know, even though it's a law, we're just going to ignore it. We're not going to do it. But again, it is on the books. It is a law. It is a avenue to go for nurses, to teach nurses that these are two really good populations to work with. You're not going to get a lot of pushback from people who are dying and children who are epileptic. You know, you'll get less pushback for sure. In 2018, the National Council State Board of Nursing came out with their guidelines for medical marijuana for nurses. The regulations outline the necessity for cannabis education. Regarding specific, they determined nurses will have an understanding of the endocannabinoid system, cannabinoid receptors, cannabinoids, cannabis pharmacology, and the research associated with the medical use of cannabis. Yet many patients reclaiming their health using cannabis pharmacology are finding there needs to be an improvement in the knowledge, skills, and attitude of their registered nurses about cannabis medicine. Registered nursing is regarded as one of the most honest and ethical professions. Yet, as part of my research on how to bring my message to RNs all over the country, I was dismayed to discover that according to our American Nurses Association Health Risk Appraisal, nurses are more likely to be overweight, have higher levels of stress, more pain, and get less sleep than the average American. Many in the nursing profession deal with work stress, fatigue, and personal problems, and they turn to alcohol and drugs. The most common substances, and this is from the American Nurses Association, of abuse are prescription painkillers, such as fentanyl and hydrocodone. And then, of course, alcohol. Nurses are in no better health than the 60% of American adults who have a chronic condition. Even worse, 42% of those with chronic conditions have what we call what we have in medicine are called multiple comorbidities. So 60% of Americans are chronically ill. 42% of those 60% have multiple comorbidities associated with diseases of a lifestyle.
This is worrying. I think Slovenia is not very far behind. It's worrying.
Yeah, it's the industrialized food, and then our what we choose to use for recreational escapism. My message of health and wellness through toning the endocannabinoid system with cannabinoids, music, nature, better food choices, and lifestyle changes is now an imperative, I feel. Nurses need knowledge, awareness, and understanding of the ECS, cannabis use, and its effects across the lifespan of people in their care. I wish I could show you one last picture. Let me see.
Try to share. I think
it's the
one
last
picture
one.
will go.
Yeah, we'll let one picture through.
Yeah, but I agree with everything you said. Nurses are okay. It goes. Something's happening. Okay.
Here's the Yasna. Can you see the Journal of
Can I put it in
Nursing
my butt?
Regulation?
Yes, I can see.
I would recommend you download this. It's a PDF, and this is an amazing guideline. It's where I first started actually having a direction for my new career. And the picture. Okay.
Excuse me, I got a
The
question.
picture's not showing, however, it's me in a dispensary. So finally,
Mo is not here with us.
Okay.
again, I apologize. I just wanted to end with, I am finally in a place where I am a nurse working in a dispensary. And so I'm working. We might be getting Zoom bombed.
Yes, I think we are. How can this happen?
Yeah, they just, when you post a link in the public, they
Smith has a big
no, I don't. Yeah, anyway.
Some child or something.
Yeah, they can hop on and hijack the meeting. So
Yeah.
it looks like we've been hijacked in addition to all my tech problems. So, but that's my path. That was my path of cannabis nursing. It was a quick, it was a very different presentation from what I usually do, but I just I just wanted to point out there was no path to, and you must be feeling this too, Yasna. We have to forge our own way in nursing using our, our nursing skills and then equating them over to a psychoactive substance that's illegal. And continue to keep our nursing license because we're working in hospitals or, clinics. So.
Okay, so Ashley said that that she is working with the one dispensary, I think. Do you do the same or?
Yeah, so I just started this week actually, and today's my second day, but I'll go into the dispensary and I will consult with patients. They'll set up their appointment with me, and then we'll kind of walk through the dispensary and see which products kind of match their symptoms, and so actually Dr. Talleyrand's, information is really helpful for those who want to smoke flower and, just kind of keep guiding people towards the products that have the best efficacy with the least amount of side effects.
Great.
I'm done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And what kind of education you have for nurses in the States?
So far, not much. Let's see, it is developing. There's a couple of master's programs that people is starting a cannabis program. UCLA in California, one of the best, California state schools has a cannabis program, like schools. That is one thing that is happening. But in terms of nurses and questions, nurses and education, it's all just like me doing outreach to nurses. And, I think we should stop.
I don't know, all these people, where are all these people from?
I think you really should.
You can blog them.
Yeah,
Your meeting is annoying as fuck, little
they are
girl.
talking
Should
back.
have shit your pants.
I'll have to teach you about Zoom bombing, Yasna. We can talk about it after.
I blocked a lot of them, but they are coming back.
Yeah, they're pretty good at it.
Yeah.
That's why I don't publish my links when I do presentations, but yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. And thank you again, Dr. Talleyrand, for all you're doing. And yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks,
I
everyone.
just want to say, as we could see today, wonderful things are happening in United States. I hope that part of what today's wonderful lecturers have said comes also to us in Slovenia. And I think this is the right way, the only way we can get the desired results in Slovenia regarding cannabis, medical cannabis. We need to work together, we need to cooperate and collect experience from abroad, copy good practices. So thank you very much, Maureen, and thank you very much, Dr. Talleyrand, for this wonderful lecture. You both prepared, and thank you for sharing the knowledge. So this
Have a great evening. Good night.
Have a good evening.
night.
Thank you.
Bye.